them are now not so sure, and that's a decision that doesn't affect the production riders, but it does affect the riders of the superbikes and the prototypes, whether they run on slicks or treaded wet weather tyres. They're facing 306 kilometres, 306 laps, 800 kilometres around the 2.62 Grand Prix circuit at Oran Park, and this is it. You see down the bottom Tirana corner, which is not as tight as we showed, Bitupave. We're running now down to the stop, which is Bitupave. Then they go under the bridge and off towards Ampol after that tight right-hander, Coca-Cola. Then up over the bridge, round through the S's, onto Sutton's Corner, which is a fast sweeper, the Marlborough Dogleg, then the tight sweeping, rising left-hander back onto the main straight. The third bike's interesting, number 7. You can see it there. That's the Greg Pretty bike to be shared with Gary Coleman, an XS 1100 Yamaha with a chain rear drive, and I think they're going to get a flying start this time. Chain instead of shaft rear drive on one of the bikes that should be right up front, a little bit down on power, but very good handling. The Dennis Neal highly favoured bike, number 8, and Mick Cole Honda. Further back in the grid as John Harvey speeds up and pulls away. The flag goes and they're away for 306 laps, 800 kilometres.
Feeney takes the lead
for the first time.
Paul Feeney takes the lead on bike 16, the Kawasaki 1100. Tucking in behind him, bike 8, Dennis Neal.
What a mercurial start for Dennis Neal. He was a long way back on the grid. He was in 9th grid position.
Then the rest of the field streams through, already well spread out, but it's Feeney in the lead with Dennis Neal coming up on the inside. Braking challenge, can't do it. Feeney holds his lead. Early days yet, Dennis Neal. Take it easy.
Enormous amount of experience in the man running in 2nd place there, and a hard riding boy he is too. Dennis Neal going to Isle of Man later this year and to Mallory Park in England, because his ability was recognised during the Swan season by English sponsor Mal Carter. Watch his style through the S's.
Probably the best prepared motorcycle in the race is Dennis Neal's Honda CB1100. It is a magnificent machine, taken a month to properly prepare it, and certainly Dennis Neal has the goods underneath him to be able to bring back a win today. Feeney scratching already, and there goes Neal down the inside.
What Neal knows too is that he'll be superbly backed up by Mike Cole, our long-distance expert, very quick and ultra-reliable on the bike, and that there's a pile of spare parts in the pits. There's exhaust pipes and wheels, wet weather rubber, everything he could possibly need in an emergency.
And here comes bike number 1, the Moriwaki Kawasaki, with Andrew Johnson, the Australian champion, on board. He also was way back in the field, but is he flying now, coming up into 3rd position. Andrew Johnson, a scratcher of no mean note, and he is desperate to get to the lead. Now goes under Feeney on the inside, going down into Coca-Cola corner, and takes over 2nd position.
We're about to have what's going to be like a scratch race, I think, in its tempo, as Johnson comes up onto Neal. Both of them love to lead races. Don't like having anybody in front of them. The Johnson bike, the Moriwaki Kawasaki, running in the prototype class, one bike down there, number 48, Poto, on the Honda 1100. There you are. And another one's just gone into the pits, in fact, which is Paul Harmon on number 26 Suzuki 1100.
And look at the mud all over that bike. That shows what happens when you even get one wheel off the track, because it is very muddy. And here comes bike 1 now. Andrew Johnson up to challenge Dennis Neal. Look at the way that Moriwaki Kawasaki bike 1 leans. He goes up the outside. Dennis Neal sees him at the last minute. Oh.
I think Dennis Neal may be in trouble from the hand signal. Yes, pit area. Yeah, Dennis Neal troubles for the favourite in the superbike class. Straight into the pits. This is really unexpected. And you're looking at the favoured team in the superbike class. The only Honda 1100 actually in that class. There's a whole pile of them in the production class. Some 6 of them running in that class, but this 5 at least. This one making the 6th of the Honda 1100s. Michael Cole, the co-rider. Japanese mechanic Chris Dowd, mechanic that prepares the bikes for Dennis.
Seems to be
really unsettles the team.
My goodness, it was the steering head loose by the looks of it. and he's off in 32.5 seconds lost in the pits, assuming he gets moving. So 32.5 seconds Dennis Neal has spent stationary and back into the event. That'll put him half a lap behind the leaders. 800 kilometres to go, but my goodness, 30 seconds is a handicap that you don't want at this early stage. And there's the leader, Bike 1, Andrew Johnson, the Moriwaki Kawasaki. Arrived in Australia only on Thursday, did the rolling chassis brought in by Ralph Ross Hannon, the Sydney enthusiast, who then put in the engine which Dave Aldana used in the Swan Insurance Series last year in Australia. This engine capable, oh look at that, the bumps through Innergold Corner are going to be something to really be watched in this event.
Well, the other aspect on that bike is that yesterday in the rain or on a wet track, the co-rider Wayne Gardner was doing some of his wheelie stunts down the straight, and he got the front wheel crossed up as he was looking to one side to see where he was going with the front of the bike up high. The wheel actually stopped rotating, and when he brought it down onto the track, it was like a plane landing at 190 kilometres an hour. The wheel skidded and skipped and locked up, and he had a tank slapper, actually broke the wheel. And Wayne Gardner said, that's the end of those things for me. He said, the stuntmen can do it, and people can do it on dirt, but no more on a racetrack.
The bike has with it in Australia a full-time chassis mechanic, Tom Komatsuki, who's been brought out by Moriwaki simply to make sure that this machine runs well today. But the bike was held up in customs, and when they finally got it to the track on Thursday afternoon, it was raining, so now is the first time that the bike's been ridden in the dry, which means that until now they haven't had a chance to properly work out what sort of handling capabilities this machine does have. And in the race is not the time to work it out.
Dennis Neal, we hear, had loose handlebars, an incredible error by one of the biggest budget and best prepared teams in the event, and Dennis Neal now working his way through the back end of the field. After only 6 laps covered, the initial race leader, Paul Feeney, on that Kawasaki 1100 number 16, reduced to walking, finally getting the bike firing again over the Bridgestone Bridge, and I would imagine back to the pits for a checkout or something to be fixed, or some tale of woe. We didn't see what happened. There he is being lapped by the race leader Johnson, who's now finding his way through the tail end of the field, although he's going to have a harder time getting past Feeney. He demands that he go by, and he gets by. My goodness, you can see how forceful Johnson's feeling. A time for him on the 5th lap was 1:22.78 compared to Dennis Neal's lap record of 1:21.1. So Johnson's still probably got a couple of seconds up his hand. But Feeney going off down the straight again. No, he was looking over his right shoulder there to find his way to the pit lane as Johnson came by, but everything okay, and he continues. Have a look at a man in a hurry. Dennis Neal on bike number 8 into the pits at the end of the first lap, and now rushing through the tail end of the field. 1:23.3 his previous lap to this one as he comes to round up bike number 12, Greg Drew, on the Kawasaki 1100. But he's being held up by traffic, the outright lap record holder, in about 20th position at this stage. He was half a lap behind everybody and has pulled back half the field, and look at his progress. No better man to take the pressure of that unexpected and unsettling early pit stop than to get out there, knuckle down, and to fight his way back. And probably within an hour, he'll be fighting up around the lead again. But Sutton's corner, the fast left-hand sweeper, where if you go wrong on the exit, you're right out in the dirt. There he is. Underneath them, round the outside, outbrake them, outspeed them down the straight. No respect for anybody. And there are few in the field who'll be able to match pace with him. Time coming up here. There it is, 1:21.09. Well, now Dennis Neal is the lap record holder at 1:21.1. The Superbike lap record. Dennis Neal on that improved production bike 1:21.1, so within tenths or even hundredths of a second of his own lap record. And look at the traffic.
Moira Bolden with me at the moment, manager of the Kawasaki Bike 16. Moira, this looks pretty disastrous. What's happening?
I think, well, it suddenly went onto 2 cylinders for some unknown reason, and Steve seems to think it could be a coil, but, you know, who knows? It's just one of those things. We're going well for a while.
That's a major mishap for the start of the race. Are you
Well, we've had the whole week
for the rest of the race?
Oh, yeah, we'll be there, but we've had the whole week and everything's gone beautifully, and we've sorted out our dramas, but, you know, we're used to this, whether it be 6 Hour or Coca-Colas or whatever.
At the end of half an hour, bike number 2, but stopping. That's the Dave Robbins, Pete Byers Ducati from Queensland, the bike that led the race in the rain last year with Wayne Gardner riding, but it had electrical trouble then, and it's got real problems now. It was immediately in front of Dennis Neal. Dennis Neal had already overtaken it just before he came to a stop. So with 22 laps covered, Dennis Neal has fought his way back to 6th position and is chasing bike 33, the leading production bike, the Honda 1100 of Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell. Dennis Neal lapping some second to a second and a half faster at the moment than the race leader Andrew Johnson. Goes across the start-finishing line and in fact is down towards the bottom of the straight there. Just gone out of camera on the right and towards the Bridgestone Bridge.
And there's Neil, the next lap through. He's just passing the broken down Dave Robbins, Ducati NCR 860. And big Dennis Neal now up into 6th position in the race, having dropped back further than 20th position earlier in the event. And he's lapping about a second a lap faster than the race leader, Andrew Johnson, on the Moriwaki Kawasaki. Neil has to keep his revs down. He has to conserve the engine because he's got almost 800 kilometres to go, and yet he is trying so desperately hard on this bumpy Oran Park circuit.
Normally he's been revving it as high as 10,500 revs in sprint races, but Chris Downey's mechanic would like to see him pull that back to at least 9.5, if perhaps not 9,000 revs for this 800 kilometre journey. But what he's dropping in revs, he's making up for it working the bike. That bike is a beautiful specialist solo-built bike, and yet he's still hanging out of the saddle. It's almost a racing position, but he's still getting his tail sideways off the saddle. Chasing at this moment, the bike immediately in front of him, number 33, Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell sharing a Honda 1100, similar to Dennis Neal's bike, except that it's standard. Dennis Neal's is modified.
Roger Hayes' bike, in fact, leading the production class of the Coca-Cola 800 at this stage by 3 places with Glenn Taylor and Graham Muir, who's in 8th position. Hayes in 5th at this stage. That's Dennis Neal there on the improved production Honda CB1100R.
And is now 33 seconds behind the race leader, so he is all but 33 seconds in front of the field, which he trailed at the end of lap 1.
But in his furious pursuit, what price is he paying in terms of tyre wear, in terms of working his engine too hard? These are the questions which must be playing on the minds of his mechanics at this stage as they watch Dennis try to take back the lead, but at what price to the machine which has to last 800 kilometres?
The Marlborough dog leg looks a nice simple manoeuvre.
There's 33, he's just passing now, so he's coming up to get him. It's Roger Hayes, and through he goes. Dennis Neal through Roger Hayes, and now up into 5th position in the race, and in pursuit now of bike 11, Michael Hone, on the Suzuki 1100 Superbike.
Luck for David Robbins on the NCR Ducati, running in the prototype class, which he'd hoped would run well, particularly if it rained, he's thrown a chain. And he's working away at replacing it, having been brought a new chain by his relief rider from the pit area.
Good news, however, is that the bike at least hasn't had electrical problems, which has plagued it in the last 2 years since Robbins has brought it to Australia. This bike, one of 5 factory bikes built for the Mike Hailwood return to racing at the Isle of Man in 1978.
This is the race leader still on bike number 1, Andrew Johnson, the Australian Unlimited champion. Third place is number 32, the yellow Kawasaki, with just a little bit of a fairing, nipping in there on the left-hand side. And then Dennis Neal has now miraculously there on number 8 fought his way back to 4th place.
And incredibly, only 12 seconds separates the top 4 in the field, only 3 seconds separating bike 1 to bike 7. And then Dennis Neal is 12 seconds behind and catching by a second a lap.
An incredible race situation. Andrew Johnson still in the lead, 37 laps covered, and coming up towards, well, 55 minutes running. But the 3 lead bikes, there's second and there's third. Dennis Neal now fighting his way back to third on bike number 8. In front of him is Greg Pretty on the Yamaha number 7, and still Andrew Johnson, the race leader, on 1. So that's how close the leading 3 are, as Dennis Neal wants bike number 7 and second place.
And Neal charging down through the lap score barrier now, down to a 1:19.3 on that lap, while Andrew Johnson is holding 22s. Johnson seems to have set a pace and doesn't want to move from it, even though he knows now that Dennis Neal is breathing down his neck. Neal goes through another bike, and now it's a clear track to Greg Pretty on bike 7, just in front of him, and Dennis Neal's got the scent and he's after it. There's Greg Pretty. There's Dennis Neal, and look at him charging that Honda down, catching up under brakes. He must have caught 2 seconds just down the straight and in the braking area there.
This is an incredible ride by Dennis Neal. It really is. There he is, attacking second place after being motherless last after a pit stop at the end of lap 1. Here he is, Greg Pretty, an Australian Unlimited champion, and not far in front to the race leader, to whom Dennis Neal sacrificed half a lap just 45 minutes ago, 50 minutes ago. The race leader only a few seconds in front of him. Traffic, as you can see, holding up both Neal as he's worked his way through, and also on that occasion, Pretty. There's the tail of the Yamaha. It's the first outing for that bike, actually, which is going incredibly well. A twin plug head on it. A completely different, locally designed rear swing arm and chain drive instead of the Yamaha rear end and shaft drive. Onto the straight. 1100 cc's of Yamaha, 1100 cc's of Honda 4. One very much a touring bike, the lead of the 2. The other a purpose-built production racer. And second place, Dennis Neal, bike number 8, to be ridden later in the event by Michael Cole.
Cole, of course, won the event last year. Dennis Neal is saying, get back, Greg Pretty, but Pretty comes up alongside to challenge, and Neal having a bit of fun out there as well. He's enjoying himself today, but he mustn't be pleased that his handlebars fell loose, and he dropped so much time earlier in the event because he's had to work so hard to make up the pace. Less than 4 seconds now up to bike 1, Andrew Johnson in the lead, and Dennis Neal wants the lead very badly.
The race situation, just after 11 o'clock, the race just a bit over 1 hour old, and Dennis Neal probably in retrospect will be sad that he didn't get back into the lead within the hour, but he's going to hit the lead in a moment. This is miraculous riding from the big boy from Sydney as he comes up onto the Australian Unlimited champion, the boy from Melbourne, Andrew Johnson, lapping in 1:22. In the previous lap, Neal pulled back 3 seconds in a lap on Johnson.
And the braking area, this is where Neal will try for it. And he does it. Dennis Neal in the lead, and Andrew Johnson could do nothing about it. So Dennis Neal takes the lead of the Coca-Cola 800 after just 1 hour of racing, when he dropped to almost last position.
44 laps completed.
Neal now, his crew feel that he may have better fuel consumption than the Moriwaki Kawasaki, which is just passed and relegated to second position. So they're looking for more time on the track from Dennis Neal that perhaps Andrew Johnson could give in his motorcycle, which of course will give the Honda an even greater advantage. However, how much tyre wear has Dennis Neal put on the Honda in his furious pursuit of first place? That's the question that's worrying Clive Woofenden, his team manager in the pits. And Neal romps away from second position. That's
In third place it was Greg Pretty on the Yamaha 1100, but down as you can see and with problems, or whether he's been down, that might be unfair to him, but he's been off the bike, and so that's as Dennis Neal hits the lead. Greg Pretty with problems on bike 7 in third place, so that means the Mick Cork Scott Stevens Kawasaki number 32 will be third. The McHone Rob Phillips Suzuki 1100 number 11 will be fourth. And the first production bike, Roger Hayes Malcolm Campbell number 33, comes up to fifth.
having the fun of Cork is Tasmanian Scott Stevens, sharing the bike with Michael Cork, of course, the Kawasaki 1100, which at the moment is in third position. Scott Stevens, probably the most talented young rider in this race, only 21 out of Tasmania, and going to have a big season in Australian motorcycle production and superbike racing this year. Stevens is all over this machine. Look at him fling the big bike around. I think it's probably fair to say that it is not the best handling Kawasaki in the event today, and Stevens is riding this bike well and truly on its limit.
He's a great talent, Stevens. Actually, he reckons he's broke, and he's got his superbike up for sale. So he said he was a bit despondent. He came up here and it was raining, and he's got his bike for sale, and everything's going wrong. But he is a great talent. He really is. Most unassuming, and rides like a demon. Look at the way he gets off the saddle of that bike. And have a look at the tattered kneecaps on his leathers.
The bike certainly ill handling down the straight. It had massive speed wobbles. Even there you can see the front end of the bike moving about, probably far too much for comfort. But look at the leathers on Stevens that Stevens is wearing. His kneecaps especially worn fully away by feeling the bike round the circuit.
And look at the way he pulled his knee in there because he was going to rub it on the ripple strip on the inside of the corner.
So the race leader now lapping all but the very top competitors, certainly lapped back to fifth position. So all but the top five on the same lap with an hour 23 gone in the Coca-Cola 800.
The pits goes third place holder until he pulled in Scott Stevens after some brilliant riding on number 32. He's been ringing the heart of that bike. A refuel, a standard stop as you can see, and they have a very good look at the rear tyre, because as Michael Cork gets on, there's no question that later in the race they will need a tyre change, I think, from the way Scott Stevens has been riding. Cork took fifth place in last year's Coca-Cola 800, the inaugural event.
Like up the inside of the circuit, we don't know whether he's crashed or whether the bike is...
24 seconds the stop, quite good at this stage of the day for Michael Cork. 24 seconds and back out, still in third position, I would think.
And not dropping a great deal of time there, but Dennis Neal has pulled out 25 seconds, and there is the race leader, number 8. He's pulled out 25 seconds on Andrew Johnson in second place on number 1. Andrew Johnson, who led the race for the major early part of the race until about just after 1 hour after the initial race lead away from the start was taken by Paul Feeney on bike 16. But Johnson due to make a pit stop fairly shortly. He's now in second place. A good lead over the Mick Cork Scott Stevens Kawasaki number 32 rider for Johnson, Wayne Gardner. But the Kawasaki that was lying in third place has had a second unscheduled pit stop and has relegated that position to the leading production bike, number 33 of Roger Hayes, Malcolm Campbell.
Only the two leaders on the same lap, Dennis Neal, Michael Cole on bike 8, and Andrew Johnson, Wayne Gardner on bike 1, are the only two still on the same lap. And here comes Johnson, signaling he's coming to the pits for his first scheduled stop at 1 hour 35 minutes into the event. How quick will this be? It's crucial.
Bike number 1, the Kawasaki Moriwaki team bike, who at the moment, after 67 laps, are in second place. They did lead the race for the first 50 laps, but they've since been overtaken by Dennis Neal. They're refueling. Off the bike, Andrew Johnson, and onto the bike, Wayne Gardner. The policy of the Kawasaki Moriwaki team is that at this stage they're still taking it pretty easy. Wayne Gardner said to me just before he got on the bike that they were still cruising. There's a long way to go on the race, and he's out now chasing Dennis Neal.
34.5 seconds the stop for Andrew Johnson, and Wayne Gardner now back on the bike. But an idea of how slow that stop was, it took Michael Cork only 20 seconds to refuel his bike in third position.
Andrew Johnson taking a well-earned drink. Andy, it's a fairly cool day here at trackside. It must be hot after doing those first 60-odd laps.
Yes, it certainly is a handful there.
What's been your tactics over the first stage of this race? Because you were challenged pretty strongly there by Dennis Neal, who now has a 20-second lead on you.
Well, we're playing a strategy race. It's just consistent times. I know Wayne will go faster than me by about half a second to a second, so that'll match Dennis, and I can overmatch Michael Cole. So far it's good, but my geez, there's a few little handfuls over back section.
There's what's it, a bit rough out there, is it?
Yes, very rough. Very rough indeed.
And how are you feeling about the bike? Because really it's untested, isn't it, as far as we've seen here in Australia?
Well, so far, before this race, I've only done 12 laps on practice on it, and that was in the wet. So I'm still sort of, as the race goes on, I'm sorting myself out at the same time.
Now on his 75th lap in the Coca-Cola 800, Dennis Neal is playing an economy game on his Honda CB 1100R. If he can get to 77 laps without stopping for fuel, he knows he can get through the race with only 4 pit stops, picking up 1 pit stop on the Kawasaki, but Dennis Neal can't do it. He's coming into the pits on lap 75, so he's 1 pit stop short of being able to do the distance to save himself 4 sessions.
No, he's just completed another lap now, which means he's got there. That is 76 laps completed. He's cut out 1 pit stop. Goes by also in the pits, bike number 7, the Greg Pretty Gary Coleman Yamaha 1100, which has dropped to 6th place, an involuntary stop out the circuit. But this has been brilliant riding by Neal, not only for pace, but for fuel economy. He's been out there longer on a more powerful and developed version of that Honda, as Michael Cole gets into the set. And a brilliant stop too. He's been out there longer than some of the production Hondas that are not putting out as much power.
Only 21.6 seconds in the pits. Brilliant pit work from Team Honda, and he's back in the lead.
Still in the lead. Michael Cole now in the saddle on number 8.
Well, Dennis, 2 laps up on the leaders of second place team of the Moriwaki Kawasaki. Were you going as fast as you could, or were you taking it just a little bit conservatively?
No, well, in the second lap of the race, my handlebar came loose over in the S's, and I almost fell off. It came right back into my stomach. Came in, we tightened it up. I tried reasonably hard for a while, but once I got by, I've just been riding around a steady pace, just taking it easy.
And do you feel you can maintain that for the 800 kilometres?
I think so, yeah. The bike's running absolutely spot on. I just hope to God the weather holds and we can do that pace all day, or I can. I think Mick can probably keep it up too.
Well, what's the situation now? Is Mike going to try and get a little bit of a lead on them in case the weather does break? Because Gardner and Johnson are much better weather riders, aren't they?
Yes, I think that was our plan, to go a little bit harder in the dry and make that buffer zone in case it rained. But we'll just see how Mike's wrist stands up to it, because it is very hard over in the first gear corner to hang on to it.
And what if his wrist does start to play up? You're going to ride the maximum time for the race?
Well, that's the idea. I just hope that I'm up to it. It'll really give me a good test out.
With the 2-hour mark in the Coca-Cola 800 now coming up, the leaderboard tells the story. Bike 1, Andrew Johnson and Wayne Gardner are in second position on 81 laps, and they lead the very small prototype class of this event. Bike 8, Dennis Neal and Michael Cole on 82 laps lead the race. Bike 33, Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell lead the production class on their Honda CB 1100R on 80 laps, so they're only some 2 laps behind the leader, Dennis Neal and Michael Cole. Leading the production class in the Coke 800 is Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell. Campbell here in the saddle on bike 33, the Honda CB 1100R. They're remarkably in third position outright behind Dennis Neal and Mike Cole on bike 8 and Andrew Johnson, Wayne Gardner on bike 1. They are also 5 outright positions ahead of the next bike in the production class, the Terry Turner, Dave Burley Honda CB 1100R, which is in 8th position. So Roger Hayes, one of the best production riders in the business, doing a good job, and Malcolm Campbell certainly keeping the seat well and truly warm right now.
Campbell proved last year that a production bike could go well in the Coke 800 because he came home in second place on a Honda 900, partnering Rodney Cox behind the Superbike Honda of Mick Cole, Alan Decker. Another production bike was, in fact, took third, that Yamaha 1100 ridden by Ron Bolden and Rick Walden. There's the race leader on bike number 8, Michael Cole, the relief rider, who's been lapping a couple of seconds slower than Dennis Neal and about 3 seconds slower than the man in hot pursuit behind him, Wayne Gardner, on the Andrew Johnson Moriwaki Kawasaki. He just went into the picture there, which is now within a couple of seconds of him. They've done 96 laps. The race has been going for 2¼ hours, and the race lead, I think, is about to change again. This great battle between the Honda Superbike number 8 and the Moriwaki Kawasaki running in the prototype class, in which there are only 3 bikes, goes up to the Dunlop Bridge. Michael Cole, a slower, steadier, more of a long endurance type pace rider than Dennis Neal, but also suffering from a not fully repaired scaphoid bone in his wrist, and with the wrist strapped up, there was Wayne Gardner. Race leader and Gardner. Look at Gardner in hot pursuit, and just as Dennis Neal hounded Johnson and took him, the reverse is happening now with Gardner out after Cole, and with rain falling to the south of the circuit down Picton Way.
And there he goes. Bike 8 in the lead, bike 1 right behind him. They are on the same lap and racing for the lead. And the Moriwaki Kawasaki pulls to the inside and takes Michael Cole. And Cole seems powerless to do anything about it. So Wayne Gardner takes over the lead. If it rains, Wayne Gardner is the rainmaster. He likes it. But did you see that telltale puff of blue smoke coming out of the back of the Moriwaki Kawasaki? The Kawasaki engine is supposed to be bulletproof. It shouldn't blow up. But my goodness, that blue smoke didn't look all that good to me.
97 laps completed there on their 98th. Last year, to do 100 laps, it took until nearly just after 20 to 1, and now it will be just after 20 past 12 this year. Of course, they were handicapped last year in the early part of the race by rain. It looks as though that could be the situation later in this race.
The other tactic that exists, of course, is that Gardner needs an extra pit stop than that of the Honda. He will need 5 pit stops, while the Honda only needs 4. That means that he must open at least a minute on the Honda behind him to give him the opportunity to take 1 more pit stop. And there is the rain. To the south of Oran Park, the rain clouds are gathering. It's perhaps 10 kilometres away at this stage. There's very little breeze at Oran Park at the moment, but what there is blowing up from the south. So slowly, ever slowly, that massive rain is starting to move towards the riders, and many of them, the race leader amongst them, are on slick tyres. When it hits, there'll be action aplenty in the pits. that does.
The race leader down, Andrew Johnson, co-riding with Wayne Gardner. Wayne Gardner, the Rainmaster, has thrown it away as rain starts to fall at Oran Park, trying to make up ground to get as big a cushion between himself and second place before the rain really set in, and within half a lap of the rain on the track board being held out at the start-finish line.
Gardner looking a bit dodgy in the last couple of laps. In fact, he was having a little bit of front-end problem with the motorcycle, so maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the rain as such, but rather a front-end problem with the bike. But it does certainly appear at this stage that whatever's happened to the motorcycle in that crash has been fairly major, and I'd say that Wayne Gardner is out of the event.
Wayne Gardner.
Here we go. Let's see what happened to him.
Tail goes. Oh no, the front. Out of the S's there. Not a bad fall as far as the rider's concerned. He kept moving. He'd be a bit sore and sorry at this stage.
The mud certainly helped him save himself, and maybe has helped save the bike as well, because the bike got onto the mud at the side of the circuit fairly quickly, and as such slid a long way, but perhaps didn't do too much damage.
That is just the thing that Mark Moriwaki in Japan was worried about. He's got a bike for Wayne Gardner waiting at Daytona next week, a spare bike and 3 spare engines. And here's another bike in troubles, the Triumph that last year it wasn't classified as a finisher because it didn't cover enough laps, ridden by Henderson Smith and Price, but running again this year. It covered 200 laps last year, but Gardner is due at Daytona next weekend with 3 spare engines and 2 bikes and a $10,000 contract, and the last thing they wanted to have happen to him was a fall. Here's another one as rain starts to fall.
That's the bike that's in 5th position, the Emmanuel Blanco Greg Taylor bike, and that's Taylor on the machine, and that now is down too, so there is rain on the circuit, allied with a lot of rubber that's been laid in the last 2 hours, and it's not doing any of the machines any good as light rain starts to fall. The slick tyres just can't handle the pace. That's Greg Taylor.
That rider, as you can see, also uncomfortable. There is another bike down, 31. That's the bike that was ring-ridden by Marvakic and Ambrose. The rider receiving attention there from the travelling marshal. They all got a rain on the track sign from one of the stewards at the start-finish line about 2 laps ago. But, of course, under racing conditions, the idea is to stay just within that boundary of adhesion, and you're exploring, really. You're going out into the unknown when rain starts to fall.
Well, Wayne Gardner's front wheel certainly didn't hold that boundary of adhesion because it just slid away from underneath him. He pulled on lock and there was nothing he could do about it. He just went straight down. What a huge disappointment for the Moriwaki bike with Gardner and Johnson on board.
Looking at $10,000 for first prize is a big part of the consideration, as well as Taylor tries to jump-start number 15. But Cole, now the race leader on number 8 on the bike that was forced up so well into the lead by Dennis Neal, is looking good, because Cole is good in the rain. He has a long distance type pace. He's not near as close to the limit as such as Wayne Gardner is there, trying to fix his bike, and with Andrew Johnson, I think, with him. Second place now will be the production bike number 33. There's the race leader.
And Will, the problem with Wayne Gardner's bike is, by the looks of it, that he's got mud right up his exhaust pipe and can't get the bike started. The compression can't overcome the mud packed hard into the exhaust pipe. He's trying to dig it out, by the looks of it, with one of the flag marshal's flags.
And there's another one down. It just shows how slippery it is. That's number 46. Howard and Martin, one of the tail end runners on a Suzuki 1100. But the complexion of this race changing entirely in a matter of about 5-8 minutes. Into the pits goes bike number 15.
And we'll probably go for a change of rubber. Almost certainly we'll go for a change of rubber to something more suitable for the conditions that are now underway. But there's no hurry in the Blanco Taylor pit, because they do have to change quite a deal of the machine. New handlebars going on the machine, as we can see. So they're not even worrying about the tyres at this stage, but rather to repair the damage that was done in the fall before they even get to the root cause of the fall in the first place. There's bike one now coming back to the pits. Wayne Gardner on board, I would suggest.
Riding contrary to his team manager's wishes from the last Castrol 6R, Peter Malloy. Peter didn't want him to have anything to do with the race this weekend. He said, get yourself to Daytona in 100% shape and ready to take the contract there and for the races in England.
John Pace, in fact, was due to ride the bike one as we see bike 7 go through, the Greg Pretty Gary Coleman bike, now in 3rd position in the race. And Coleman at the helm, the bike moving around a little bit there.
Coleman, the good steady rider who under these difficult conditions, really the riders must pull more into reserve. They must go almost too slowly into some corners or risk disaster. And Coleman's the sort of rider, he's very quick on a TZ 750, but nevertheless very rarely oversteps his limit. Got very fine judgment, lots of experience, 27 years old and very likely to keep that bike in order.
Malcolm Pittman, the man who built this bike, in fact, has put a very sophisticated swinging arm suspension on the rear, and that certainly is helping the bike hold adhesion in these conditions.
Well, the situation is that the Kawasaki is well and truly mud spattered, and the biggest problem seems to be that mud has jammed itself down the exhaust of the Kawasaki. Wayne Gardner is covered in mud himself, so there's obviously been a pretty heavy fall or into a very wet area off the side of the track. But he seems to be keeping his leathers on. He's got his helmet on. They're cleaning his visor, and Gardner looks as though he's going to go back out. But the situation at the moment on trackside is that they're losing laps at the very rapid rate. They're now 4 or 5 laps behind. I'll just see if I can grab Wayne Gardner as he's waiting here to get back on the bike. Wayne, what happened, mate? What was the situation?
I don't really know. I overtook a couple of production bikes and I had to go on the inside of it, and I think there's a Triumph going around. They told me he's been dropping oil, and I think I must have hit a patch of oil. And the front end just went under the bike, and I couldn't do nothing about it except pull down with it.
Well, it looks like you got a problem with mud down the exhaust. Is that the biggest problem?
Yeah, that's what was clogged up there. I couldn't do nothing about it. I just had to ride it back here. We tried to get it out, but I couldn't get it all out. It's too tightly packed in because it went down on that side. So it'll be right when we get back here.
But other than that, there's no problem with the bike, you don't think?
No, it was going good. There's no problems. It just hit some oil over there, and it's just front end's just stalled on. I couldn't do nothing but go with it.
All right, Wayne, I'll leave you to it. You're going back out on the boat?
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So, with 192 laps remaining in the Coca-Cola 800, Dennis Neal and Michael Cole hold the lead on bike 8. And they're 2 laps ahead of Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell, who are on bike 33. Hayes and Campbell, of course, in 2nd position, are also the leaders of the production bike class. In 3rd position, bike 7 is Greg Pretty and Gary Coleman. And way back in 9th position is the first prototype in the event. Of course, Andrew Johnson and Wayne Gardner still in the pits at this stage.
That's the sign that was half a lap early, giving Wayne Gardner the warning that didn't, however, do him any good. Light rain is falling, and the feeling of people around the track is that it's getting worse. As we see now Wayne Gardner back out on the track in 16th position. He's come from 1st to 16th with that fall on a pit stop, and light rain probably getting a little bit heavier. And from the race leaders pit, Dennis Neal McColl's Team Honda entry, we hear that he's running on slicks, and that if the rain gets really heavy, they will bring him in immediately and put wet weather tyres on the bike.
The rain compounded by a great drop of oil at BP Bend as well, so officials working furiously to get rid of the oil at the moment to soak it up in cement. 6 laps.
Race leader Michael Cole has 119 laps completed. Behind him, in 9th place after he's fallen a pit stop, but 6 laps behind him, 113 completed, is Wayne Gardner charging. As you can see, he pulls back a lap on Michael Cole. Michael Cole, both of them in fact are on slicks, so the real chance that as the rain gets heavier, which it's doing now, and as the track finally gets saturated, we'll see the race leader come in for a change of front and rear wheel.
And Michael Cole, being terribly tentative out there, almost brought a slower rider undone when he went so slowly through a corner that the slower rider almost ran up his exhaust pipe. So Michael Cole not happy with the conditions and not happy with the tyres he has on the machine. As he has 2 laps up on the second place bike of Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell, he can afford the pit stop to put on wet weather tyres. You see how tentative he is there. Almost slowing to a dead halt, trying to keep the bike absolutely upright through the corner. Cole with a production bike all over him at this moment. Cole not going fast at all and losing ground because of it. Hilton Steele on that bike 39, a Suzuki GSX 1100 behind him, the Newcastle rider who spends most of his time as a postman riding Honda 90s around the street of Newcastle.
Suzuki 1100, number 6 down at the slowest corner of the circuit. That's the Chivers Jim Budd bike, and it's Neil Chivers who was in the saddle when it came down. There's another one down. Wayne Gardner again for the second time, and obviously more disgusted by it this time than previously. BP corner, as you can see, and Gardner saying to himself, this is not my day, and I think I've just about had enough. That's if, of course, I haven't wrecked the bike already. And then he suddenly, commercial instinct comes to the fore, and he wanders over towards the bike, thinking that the first prize is $10,000. The team are back in the pits expecting him to stay up and to keep it going. He, at this stage, was in 12th place after the previous fall and pit stop. The bike now going to be looking very sad indeed, as you can see. This is where Dennis Neal will be so pleased that he's got somebody of the wisdom and experience of the race leader, Michael Cole, on number 8. We've seen bikes go past him even under these wet conditions, as you see somebody doing there. But one that went past him was Mick Cork, riding number 32 in 6th place, and which had been as high as 3rd place in the hands of Scott Stevens, but it was only within a lap or so of that Cork fell down, and Michael Cole is still upright, as now the rain is visible and is very much heavier than before. Andrew Johnson racing off to talk to Wayne Gardner and try and fetch the bike back. Race leader going by point of Wayne Gardner's second fall. Michael Cole knows that his pits are ready with wet weather tyres set up on the rims, balanced. Wayne Gardner back into the pits on number 1. Was in 12th but has dashed his hopes now.
Heading for the pits, Michael Cole on the lead bike, bike 8. He has some very special wet weather rubber in the pits, some English Dunlops, compound number 442, that have been brought out especially for this race. There are only 2 of them in the country, and Michael Cole and Dennis Neal own both of them. They were designed specifically for sleet-like conditions, which is exactly what we're experiencing here at Oran Park today.
Heavy rain falling now as Andrew Johnson has returned to the pits just a couple of minutes after Wayne Gardner and the Moriwaki Kawasaki, number 1. Here comes Cole, an excellent co-rider, a great long-distance rider. He won the Arai 3R at Bathurst last year. He's won the Suzuka 8R. He's won the Calder 2R. Hasn't ever won the Castrol 6R, although there he goes. He's been in the position to do so, but been stopped by tyre wear and problems in the pits. But here he comes now, and let's see how long it takes the race leader, with 120 odd laps completed, to change front and rear wheel, as well as fuel the bike, and for Mick Dennis Neal to get back in the saddle.
Neal, not a man who enjoys riding in the wet, but he's going to go out and do his very best because Michael Cole gets off the machine. Now you see the mechanics working on the front and rear ends both.
Chris Dowd, the engine specialist there, grey-haired on the right-hand side of the front wheel. The Japanese Honda mechanic. He is so dedicated, loves bikes, and is a good rider himself. And they're taking it carefully. They don't want to foul it up. They've got plenty of lead. And I think that will be the way that Dennis Neil will have to ride when he gets on it.
Getting ready with the rear wheel now. They've fully floating rear caliper, which is now causing them problems. Because that was built specially for this race, that caliper, the brake caliper that you see them working with, so that it can help locate the rear wheel. It actually hangs off the chassis of the machine rather than being on the wheel itself, and helps locate the wheel in the frame. But it has given them difficulties. It was supposed to save about 30 seconds, but the wheel is now in, and they're starting to locate it up. You can hear the pneumatic jacks working. Dennis Neil himself starts to refuel the motorcycle. They've now been in the pits for 1 minute and 10 seconds only, and the rear wheel's just about in the frame. Front wheel, of course, will take longer, as the big two front discs have to be again located and tightened up in the chassis. Full tank of fuel now on the motorcycle. 26 litres of fuel goes in the bike. It should be using about half a litre per lap. Dennis Neil calmly standing by, but he wants to get underway, you can tell. Rear wheel's right. Robert Suriato doing the last adjustments to the front wheel now. Getting the discs in the forks. And we're right to go. Coming up to the 2-minute mark as Dennis Neil mounts the motorcycle. Helps push start it himself. Won't fire. Second bump start, still won't fire. Third bump start. And it's away. 2 minutes, 11.5 seconds for the pit stop.
Bike number 7, the Greg Pretty, as you can see Greg there, and then the yellow and red leathered Gary Coleman in the pits also for a change to wet weather tyres and a top-up. Dennis Neil, when he came out of the pits, rode just as you would down the road on a wet day, just going very quietly, prepared to let other bikes go past him as he felt out just how grippy it was and was determined not to make an error. Lying in 4th place is bike number 40, the Taylor Muir Honda 1100R, and going very well too, behind the Mike Cole Dennis Neil Honda number 8.
And he's only 2 laps behind, I might add, in these wet conditions, which are tending to compress the field somewhat as the production bikes start to catch the superbikes and the prototypes.
The Hayes Campbell Honda, number 33 in 2nd place and leading the production class. The Yamaha, number 7, just going out of the left side of the picture there. Greg Pretty and Gary Coleman lying in 3rd place, then bike number 40. And behind them, number 39, Hilton Steele and Standen, again a production bike, and 36, Neville Hiscock, younger brother of David Hiscock, the production ace, and Alan Decker on number 36.
Decker, of course, last year's winner of the Coca-Cola 800, and in his swan song ride here today, due to retire from motorcycle racing after today.
Well, in fact, he thought he'd retired after the last round of the Swan Series at Sandown. Not that he was in that race, but he was in that meeting. And there's a whole bunch of them together there, 40 and 36. 40 lying in 4th place, 36 lying in 6th place. But Alan Decker, Team Honda, compressed their operation, and Alan Decker was dropped from the team. But then Suzuki rang him and asked him if he'd like to run here, so he came out of retirement for the race. But says that unless there's a good contract and some good rides around, that this is it. Also in the bunch there, 2nd place, number 33. That's Malcolm Campbell, presently in the saddle of the Honda 1100 that he's sharing with Roger Hayes, leading in the production class, wedged between 2 superbikes, the Honda 1100 of Cole Neal and the Yamaha 1100 of Pretty Coleman. A good effort by this bike, great consistency, repeating the sort of story that we got last year, where production bikes came in second and third, between Superbikes first and fourth, and the best placed prototype bike was Greg Hansford, Jim Budd, finishing 8th.
And bike 33 yet to have its second pit stop with Campbell on board. It's fitted with road-going Pirelli tyres, treaded, so the wet weather is not the difficulty to this motorcycle that it has been to the Superbikes and the prototype bikes, which were of course are fitted with slick tyres. But that's what the weather's all about. You only need to crack on just a little bit more throttle and be just a little bit more aggressive with the motorcycle, and it starts to move around, dangerously so.
An example of the slipperiness that the riders are coping with admirably, actually. You see that fairly daring overtaking manoeuvre for the wet conditions. Dennis Neal is about 8 or 9 seconds slower today than he was in practices yesterday on the wet track, and that's because the track is at its worst at the moment. It's just wet, but it's still got all the grease and the tyre rubber and so on from the dry conditions, and in fact the times will quicken by perhaps up to 8 or 10 seconds as the race goes on, if the rain gets really heavy and cleans the track.
And Campbell now, a cramp in his legs. He's not a happy man at all, and he's indicating he's going to come in and looking way across to his pit there, because it's an unscheduled stop, I would say, and he is letting the pit know that he's coming in. He's been trying to stretch his legs. He's in second position in the race, but his legs are really hurting him. He's cramped, and he wants to hand over to Roger Hayes on this lap.
He's been working on his thigh muscles in both legs as he's done a slow but quite steady lap, and he really is feeling cramp. Of course, as we all know, the worst thing about cramp is keeping your legs folded. You've got to straighten those muscles out.
Most of the other riders in the race have gone to wearing wet weather gear over their leathers. He hasn't, of course, because he was out there when it was still dry, and the water has permeated those leathers, and he must be most uncomfortable. And he goes straight out again because his pit wasn't ready for him. My goodness, is that a waste of time, or is that a waste of time? He rode straight through the pit and they weren't there, and he's been forced to go out for another lap. That is disgraceful. We're in a major motorcycle race in Australia, and his pit crew weren't ready for him on something like that.
Roger Hayes, his co-rider that he hoped would be ready and waiting for him. The bike lying in second position at this stage.
There's the second of the Blanco brothers down again. That's the third fall that this machine has had at the moment. That's Greg Taylor, the New Zealander, on the machine, and that's the third time that Bike 15 has been down the road since it started raining, so not a good time for this Misaki Kawasaki.
There, Malcolm Campbell in second place and with cramp on Bike 33, the production bike, and now hauled in by Greg Pretty, riding bike number 7, the Yamaha 1100. So Pretty goes up into second place, bike number 7. So quite a lot of major changes of place during this race, and that's been another of them. Greg Pretty, who's been off that bike once early in the race, but recovered fairly smartly and is riding with a fair deal of application, as you can see there. Really is trying hard, and 14's down. That's the Pete Blanco bike, yet another of many bikes that have gone down. A 780cc Kawasaki running in the Superbike class.
This is the second of the Misaki Kawasaki's and the second of the Blanco brothers bikes to go down in this race, so both of them have now been down, and we're on bike 7 now in second position, one lap behind the leaders, Dennis Neal and Michael Cole, and Greg Pretty certainly is chasing for the lead. He hasn't given it up in any way, shape or form, and he's really giving this bike stick down the main straight. Only needs a momentary lapse from Neal and Cole, and Pretty could be way up there, and he's pouring the pressure on, even though one lap behind at this stage. There's the leader, bike 8. Dennis Neal in the saddle, feeling out the track. He's got these good wet weather Dunlop tyres on, especially imported from England. That's giving him a great advantage as he feels his way round the circuit past bike 15, the Kawasaki that's fallen down. But there goes the beaut little Ducati, the smallest bike in the race, the Ducati Panther, the 600cc machine, which in fact, ridden by Lee Roebuck, claimed pole position in the rain yesterday when it blitzed the field, and it's certainly relishing these wet conditions, and it'll be a motorcycle, although way down the field, in 7th position in fact, that'll be worth watching if this rain continues, because Roebuck in the rain on this beaut little Ducati is going to be a force to be reckoned with if the rain keeps up for the next 2 or 3 hours.
Dennis Neal, the race leader, off at Sutton's Corner with being pressured by Greg Pretty on bike number 7 behind him. And there's the race leader down in this streaming rain with Greg Pretty making a second and a half on him on the previous lap.
Greg Pretty is 1 lap and 16 seconds behind Dennis Neal, so Dennis Neal only has about 1 minute 40 seconds at this stage to get himself back on the circuit. Pushing it to the inside now. We've had word through there's not a lap between them. They are just on the same lap as each other. So in fact now, Greg Pretty there on bike 7 will storm to the lead in the Coca-Cola 800, has done so already at the bottom of the circuit.
Which in fact says that of the front runners at the moment, all have had a fall. Greg Pretty was down earlier, Dennis Neal now down. Malcolm Campbell in 3rd place hasn't been off bike 33, nor of any of the other production bikes.
That's Greg Pretty, our new race leader on the Pitman's Yamaha prepared Yamaha XS 1100.
He was riding in a fiercely determined fashion anyway in the rain, obviously not knowing that he was only 20 odd seconds behind Neal, pulling in time on him, about 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds a lap. And
there's Dennis Neal
into the
pits, and fast into the pits too. His bike a bit damaged, but certainly rideable, so it'll be a case of repairing it now again. He's in the pits, stopped, handlebars gone, mechanics throwing up their arms saying, my goodness, we can't repair that. Jim Richardson, the team manager.
First time I've seen Dennis Neal fall off a bike for a long time.
And it happened in the wet, and he doesn't like the wet, and he probably won't like it anymore after this. Certainly the bike down the left-hand side is gone. You can see the handlebars certainly have a problem. And looking at the bottom end of the motorcycle where his foot peg's gone.
Well, as you can see, the Honda 1100R, who was the race leader, Dennis Neal, and Mick Cole, has had a dramatic fall. They've lost the casing cover and spilling oil all over the place at the moment. A lot of mud has got into the engine. And as far as they're concerned, they're in real trouble. The casing has come off the outside of the engine. There's oil and mud all over it, and they're going to be in a lot of strife trying to clean this up in time to get back into the race. They've already lost the race lead to bike number 7, Greg Pitty and Gary Coleman, and this is disaster for the Hondas because they were well and truly established in the lead after a great performance to bring them up from a poor start, and it certainly looks bad for them at this situation.
There's the race leader, Greg Pretty, in the lead, while Dennis Neal and Michael Cole are 1.5 minutes into their pit stop, and it looks like the clock won't stop for several minutes to come as yet. So Pretty in the lead from Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell, with another production bike, that of Glenn Taylor and Graham Muir, now in 3rd position. with Hilton Steele and Ian Standard in 4th, and Neville Hiscock and Alan Decker in 5th position. So there's now one superbike, that of Pretty and Coleman in the lead, with 5 production machines behind them in the race for the lead.
Well, Dennis Neal at the moment is trying to clean his gloves in the water on the pit track side here. If I'll grab him if I can. Dennis, can I just grab you for a moment, please, mate? And what happened, mate, there at Sutton's Corner?
That was the first real slip I've had all day. I was getting the pit signals that Greg Pretty was catching me, so I was trying to just go a little bit quicker each lap. And unfortunately, just let go in a big way. I almost got it back.
What was it? Was there anything on the track or just pushing a bit too hard?
No, the rear. I just gassed it up too much and the rear end went away. But it's still running.
Still running, but you've got a lot of mud there in the engine, haven't you?
Yeah, we'll just try. That's all we can do. We'll keep going and see what happens.
Dishevelled Michael Cole, not a happy man at all. His left arm in a brace caused by his accident in the Swan Insurance Series at Sandown Park. He'll have to get back on the bike and do his very best with it when it's repaired. But to have a rider injured and the bike in not good condition certainly doesn't augur well for Honda with the half-hour mark coming up.
They have now fallen back to 4th place. Not a bad placing nevertheless for a bike that spent us 30-odd seconds in the pits at the start of the race and has now had this work to be done. Andrew Johnson just in front of second-placed Hayes and Campbell on bike 33, and there you see how slippery it is at the moment.
And here comes bike 8. Formerly the race leader, with Dennis Neal back on the motorcycle after having dropped it. They're back in 5th position at this stage, behind Pretty, Coleman, Hayes, Campbell, Taylor Muir, Steele, Standen, and then comes Dennis Neal out onto the track to see whether the Honda's in any fit condition to continue. Working on the principle that you always remount the horse that's just thrown you. Dennis Neal is back in the saddle, leaving Michael Cole, but look at all that smoke coming out the exhaust pipe.
I think only out the right-hand side. He also hasn't got into wet weather gear. He'd be nicely saturated, and the rain on his, the wind acting on him would be very unpleasant. As you see there, the second-placed and leading production bike go by, and then the little Ducati 600 of Lee Roebuck, and then Dennis Neal wending his way around very gently, but puffing smoke from the right-hand exhaust, and they have major troubles, and I think have seen the race disappear from their grip, although they are still in 5th place. They have been back, let's face it, in 44th place. They've come up to the lead. If the bike were healthy, one would still, despite these problems, have to give them a chance with 154 laps to go, almost exactly half race distance, the race being 306 laps.
But every time that Dennis Neal cracks it wide open, the smoke comes out of that right-hand exhaust pipe, and that doesn't look good. There's the second-place bike, bike 33, Malcolm Campbell, still to have its second pit stop, and it's doing very, very well indeed. The little Ducati Dama has had its second pit stop, bike 4. He's pulled back to 9th position, and is starting to move up through the field again, although obviously down the straight he's no match for the big CB 1100R production bike of Hayes and Campbell. Wonderful little bike, that bike number 4, the Panther, Ducati Panther. Released only about a year ago in Europe, and it's won a lot of 500cc races since in 500cc form. As cheekily he moves up alongside bike 33, and it's down here in the handling part of the circuit that we'll see whether Lee Roebuck on that bike can make any impression on the bike 33 Malcolm Campbell. Wisely stays behind. Right now is not the time to pass it. They take a very wide line through there to miss the deep puddle right on the apex, and again there. Pulls up alongside and in fact goes through him on the twisty bits. Well,
It looks like a desperate scene for the Honda team here at the moment. with Dennis Neal and Mick Cole discussing the problems that he's having with the bike. It doesn't look too hopeful. Dennis looks pretty resigned about things as they have a look at the bike. I think they've been waved off the circuit by the team managers and whatnot. In a moment I'll get a decision from them, but it doesn't look too hopeful. Both Dennis and Mick and the team managers having a close inspection of the bike, and I think they're going to wheel it away. Yes, they're wheeling it away. So the team that led the race for virtually the first half here in the Coca-Cola 800 have now decided to throw it in.
It sucked in a lot of sand when it went down the road, and when the side of the engine got broken and they replaced it, the ride back, it pumped all the oil out. And of course, while it was pumping oil, it was also sucking sand in. So it's ingested a whole heap of sand into the barrels. There's probably no rings left in it, so it's running on really good oil at the moment.
So with the Coca-Cola 800 just over half distance, bike 7, that of Greg Pretty and Gary Coleman, the Yamaha 1100, leads on 160 laps. In second place, Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell on bike 33, the Honda CB 1100R, in second position, 1 lap behind. Then comes another production bike, Hilton Steele and Ian Standen on the Suzuki GSX 1100, a further lap in arrears. The fourth place goes to Mick Cork and Scott Stevens, who've been off the bike, on the bike, all over the place, but they're now in fourth position on bike 32 on 153 laps, 7 laps behind the leader. Then way back in 14th position comes bike 1, the only prototype remaining in the race, Andrew Johnson and Wayne Gardner on the Moriwaki Kawasaki Formula 1 bike. Model of consistency, the Bill McCulloch Phil O'Brien Suzuki 1100 bike 9 has worked its way up to 4th position outright. McCulloch hasn't ridden a bike in 2 years. He was riding for 5 years before that, and he persuaded Phil O'Brien, the 41-year-old veteran of 2 European seasons, to join him on the machine for this race. While it is a super bike, or entered in the superbike class, it is largely a production stock machine, differing only in the way the foot pegs have been moved up, and also a special CPC exhaust system on the bike, which gives it about 5 horsepower more. But a model of consistency, and McCulloch, a 25-year-old from Campbelltown, riding on his home circuit, Oran Park, is certainly doing an excellent job to hold the bike upright and put it up into a major position in the Coca-Cola 800.
I think it's probably going to be all right. Hilton Steele and Ian Standen are sharing bike number 39, the Suzuki GSX 1100. Steele finished 6th in this race last year. They ran as a team together last year too, and very well placed at this stage because not much over half race distance. It's still the chance of plenty of problems. More than 3 hours of running to be done. Some 140 odd laps still to be covered, 141 laps remaining, so that plenty of potential problems. On number 39, they are 5 laps in arrears to the race leader, Greg Pretty, and just 2 laps in front of an incredible bunch of bikes, 4 of them in fact all on the same number of laps.
And slowing down now is bike 39, tapped his tank just a little while ago, and it could be that he's heading for the pits for a pit stop for more fuel, because it certainly seems that that other machine went straight through him. And that's bike 33 down. That's the Roger Hayes Malcolm Campbell machine in second place, and another one slides in, almost touching it again. That's Campbell on the machine, or rather off the machine at this stage, trying to get it up and going again. But it looks like we've lost second place. And it looks like bike 15 might have gone down again.
Number 9 in 4th place. Let's just have a look.
But certainly that's terrible news for the second place bike of Campbell and Hayes, with Campbell on the machine. They've lost their... Now it's bike 15 again. That's 6 times she's been down. That's some sort of record, I think, for the Coca-Cola 800. It's
Alan and Emmanuel Blanco soldiered on like this last year. I said earlier he was the hero of last year's race. They had falls and they had mechanical problems, and they never gave up. And last year they finally classified as non-finishers, but covered 257 laps, which was good enough if they'd been running at the end to have been classified as 15th place.
There's a big one down. More motorcycles off the track. Bike 1 is amongst it. So the Andrew Johnson, Wayne Gardner bike is down again. And it was Gardner on the bike. He's had his third fall in the wet today. There's 3 motorcycles in it. It's Gardner on the left of your screen there. Bike 39 is down. He was in 3rd position. That's the Hilton Steel Ian Standen motorcycle. The Suzuki GSX 1100. And the other motorcycle, 23.
Fowler and Scriven well out of contention at this stage, not in the top 18 of 31 bikes that about half an hour ago were surviving out of the 44, but there's been a fair few gone west since then, so almost 50% of the field, in fact, retired mainly through crashes and some mechanical problems.
And this time Wayne Gardner says, no more, I've had enough. He's shaking his head and he does not want to get back on that machine.
As he goes to the pits, the race leader, Greg Pretty, saturated, heading for warmth and for Gary Coleman for a fuel top-up.
Stops in the pits. We've got the clock on him. Pretty gets off the bike and he's exhausted. What can he tell Gary Coleman about the conditions, for goodness sake?
Hello, hello, hello.
Malcolm Pittman there, the race team manager from Pittman's, a family firm in South Australia, which is the state distributor for Yamaha, a stalwart supporter of Greg Pretty and of Yamaha bikes over the years in racing. And now Coleman, who too is specialised in Yamaha Grand Prix bikes, done a little bit of production bike racing, prefers the Grand Prix bikes, but says this is where the money and the backing is. I want to make a living at it.
A long pit stop took 45.5 seconds more now that the bike's finally fired, probably 50 seconds by the time the bike fired, but they can afford it because there's 7 laps in the lead at this stage, so it's a case of very, very easily with everything, making sure that all conditions are right before Gary Coleman goes out there. Now Coleman will feel his way around. A lot of people will pass him on this lap and maybe the next while he finds out where the puddles are. Puddles where the rivers are.
That's right.
Some of the crowd emulating some of the racers, retiring from the event, probably to go home and pick it up on television, because it really has been a wet and miserable day here. The ground was boggy and soggy underfoot when they arrived this morning, and with the, I don't know, perhaps 2, 3, 4 centimetres of rain that's fallen through the day, it's an absolute quagmire. As somebody said, the most dangerous part of spectating at this motorcycle race is riding your motorcycle through the pit area. In second place, bike number 9. In third place, just about to grab second from him after making 35 seconds on him in 6 laps, is the Ducati number 4, Lee Roebuck and Steve Fisher. A grand ride by Steve Fisher. That was just the gap between second and third place at this stage after some 5.25 hours of racing, just about to take him. You remember bike 9 had a pit stop just a little while ago. is a stop for 4, and then it's going to be a chase for Lee Roebuck, the more experienced, in fact, of the 2 riders on bike 4. That's the race-leading bike, number 7, with Gary Coleman stepping out of the saddle into the pit area, with, I would say, a problem. He hasn't been long on the bike. They're jacking up the tail end. He has a 7-lap lead, equivalent under these conditions to about 11 or 12 minutes over second place, number 9, the Bill McCulloch Phil O'Brien Suzuki 1100, but a rear end problem on this experimental rear end, the new swinging arm and chain drive rather than shaft drive that Pitman's put on the bike, and this has been its first race outing, or is it just a worn tyre?
Coleman had been on the bike only half an hour, so it's certainly nowhere near a scheduled stop. The tyres coming off, being very delicate about it, very gentle about it. There's no rush involved.
In the meantime, the second placed bike, 7 laps in arrears, but whittling back that time as he circulates and the others don't. And he too under threat from Lee Roebuck, now out on the little Ducati Pantar, the V-twin number 4, which is incidentally the smallest engined bike in the race. And you can see the race and track conditions. In some places the track awash with water. Everywhere there is a coating of water. Riders with the greatest of smoothness and steadiness must apply brakes, crank the bike over, feeling for the limits of adhesion, and accelerate gently out of the corners on these very big, heavy and powerful motorcycles.
Bike 41, the Rod Cox Max Heaton bike's already been down the road once, and he doesn't make it easy for bike 9, Phil O'Brien, as O'Brien comes up to lap him there. And there's our race leader, bike 7, Gary Coleman, still on the machine, remains on it, being pushed out. He's been in the pits for more than 2 laps, so his race lead is whittled somewhat as bike 9 comes down the main straight. And we could see a situation here where bike 9 and bike 7 are on the track at about the same position on the track.
3 minutes that pit stop cost the Pitman's Yamaha, so very nearly 2 laps. But plenty of time to spare because they'll still have a 5-lap margin over bike number 9. But he has his own personal battle and problems with the little Ducati threatening from behind.
There's bike 7. That's the leader, Gary Coleman, and behind him you can see bike 9, and that's second place, Phil O'Brien, going through there.
And let's have a look for the Ducati number 4. There it is. There it is. Making it, and still with Steve Fisher in the saddle too. So Steve Fisher was on it when he came in for the pit stop. He's well in the groove. He pulled back an enormous amount of time on the big Suzuki beforehand, and he looks to be out after it again. There you see the lap positions on the Phillips scoreboard as at 208 laps completed by bike number 7. Behind him, 5 laps in arrears after that unscheduled pit stop for the Pitman's Yamaha is bike 9, 203 laps completed, and then it's just 1 lap behind, or part of a lap, the bike number 4, the little Ducati, on 202 laps. As you look further along the board, actually it's a long way down to the next placed bikes, the next 4 of which are all production bikes. Production bikes have been up as high as second place outright, but now with some falls and retirements have slipped back to 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th. Those being Hilton Steele, Ian Standen on Suzuki, Neville Hiscock and Alan Decker, that's Suzuki number 39, Hiscock and Decker on Suzuki 36, Jenny Coates and Leon Fave on Suzuki number 750, number 45. You see there it's done 198 laps, and then number 44 has done 199 laps, but according to the board we're working from in the box here, that's Graham Thompson, Wayne Pratt behind them in 7th place. Gary Coleman, the race leader on bike number 7, peering out of the murk on pit straight in abysmal conditions here at Oran Park. And no doubt by now his pit crew have advised him of the news that all competitors received a few minutes ago, that the race distance has been shortened from 306 laps, 800 kilometres, to 270 laps, 707 kilometres. There's some risk that light may be very bad around 5:30, 6 o'clock, and the race being slowed by the rain could well have gone past 6 o'clock. And so to give all teams an equal chance of being aware of it and changing their strategy accordingly, the stewards have met and decided to take 36 laps off to bring it back to 270 laps, which makes it a race distance of just over 700 kilometres. And that's news that I think Gary Coleman, a very wet rider, would welcome on bike number 7, but one very much in the groove. He looks very smooth and very comfortable actually as he wheels around on the Pitman's Yamaha number 7, a bike that went down earlier in the day, had an unscheduled pit stop of a couple of minutes to attend to the rear suspension, and a rear wheel was changed, but now which is running like clockwork and is some 5 laps in front of second place bike number 9, a Suzuki 1100, running in the same superbike class and crewed by Bill McCulloch, Phil O'Brien, followed by Lee Roebuck, Steve Fisher on the little Ducati race kitted Pantar number 4. Under the bridge we see second placed number 9, 5 laps in arrears to Coleman on 7, and at one stage being caught and very nearly overtaken in second place by the Ducati number 4. Interesting story on the Ducati number 3 behind. It's being ridden by 2 impecunious riders from Canberra, Kent McClender and Neil Keith. They call it a Shadowfax Kawasaki, sorry, I said it was a Ducati. They put their every last shilling into that. In fact, yesterday Kent McClender said, I have $2.20 left on me. We need to win some prize money to get home to Canberra. The bike was finished so late that they ran it in by riding it up to Sydney, and I suspect that was done in the murk of the night, somewhat illegally. They're well out of the placings. They've had unscheduled pit stops and so on. Both of them, I was going to say, both are B graders. McClender is a provisional B grader, Neil Keith is a C grader, and they've plugged on all through the day despite their problems, and as prize money will be paid to at least 20 teams in the event. They do have a fair chance actually of taking home some booty for class prize money. Third placed bike number 4, Steve Fisher riding the Ducati Pantar, heading for the pit area. 40 laps remaining. Racing in progress now for 6 hours and 8 minutes. Just a rider change,
yes.
Not even a refuel.
It was not a scheduled stop because they'd had a stop less than an hour ago. So obviously the fatigue of the day is really starting to tell on the riders. Or could it be that the rider now on the bike is regarded as being significantly quicker, and he's going to have a real go in the last hour remaining to pull back the second place bike of Bill McCulloch and Phil O'Brien, the Suzuki 1100. We'll put a watch on them and we'll find out.
I'd say it's come in under instructions from the pit rather than the rider wanting to come in, and that's probably the reason. A wet weather specialist into the saddle now and chasing bike number 9 to try and do what he very nearly did when it pitted an hour ago. And 39, they're tailing him through the generally wet track and the occasional streams of water, is in 5th place. The Hilton Steel Ian Standard Suzuki 1100. But several laps down, in fact, to the Ducati, 2 laps down to it.
And that's how fast Lee Roebuck on the little Ducati is going. He's now caught the race leader, bike 7, Gary Coleman, although 5 laps in arrears, and will soon go through him, I would think. And there he goes, in a very, very dodgy part of the circuit, I might add. He could have easily brought both of them down there with the water that's on the track. But no doubt about it, Roebuck is out after second position. Bill McCulloch and Phil O'Brien, who are 1 lap and just a few seconds in front of them. So he is going for broke. There's no point in third place, he's after second.
So when you see bike number 9, you know that Roebuck's about to take it, and to bring the gap between him and it back to less than 1 lap. He's got a big task in front of him, but a very determined rider, and with the right bit of machinery under him, because, as he said, you can change line in the middle of corners to go round people. And there's the speed of the big Yamaha, though, down on the straight, zooming past him again. Coleman gets up into gear. The Ducati, highly commendable for 600cc, what is basically a road bike, capable of 190 km. That Yamaha in the wet will go in the dry will go much quicker than that, although neither of them achieving those sorts of speeds in the wet.
Roebuck takes him earlier on this lap, which means that if he can hold him out down here, and he does, he should get enough advantage before they get back onto the main straight to hold out bike 7 this time down the main straight.
The traditional Roebuck crouch off the bike, leaning very much forward on it, and hopeful on this lap around the back part of the circuit to build up enough of a margin not to be re-overtaken on the straight by Gary Coleman. Coleman, of course, can't afford to be worried about Roebuck. He doesn't want to be overtaken by people, but if they insist on it, well then he'd be foolish to be caught up in the nose.
There you go. You think with 36 laps remaining, with the sort of conditions that the riders have had to endure today, and it's really been a very bad day to go motorcycle racing, and you think that it's all over and no one's trying anymore, and suddenly Lee Roebuck gets up and he's got fire in his belly and he is giving it everything he can. Bike 9, Bill McCulloch over the line. There are 28 laps remaining in the Coca-Cola 800. McCulloch is in second position. He is about 3/4 of a lap in front of the third place bike of Lee Roebuck and Steve Fisher, the little 600cc Ducati. And try as hard as Roebuck might, he cannot close the gap on McCulloch. Now, McCulloch hasn't ridden a bike for 2 years. Before that, he used to race TZ 250 and 350 Yamahas in C and B grade racing and was never regarded as any great shakes. But my goodness, he's doing a good job in this Coca-Cola 800. Neat, precise, and going faster than the race leader, Gary Coleman, who wisely is buttoned off to make sure that he gets to the finish about an hour away. But at the moment, McCulloch, a privateer, doing very, very well indeed on this machine. Half the lap gone, 52 seconds. His lap time as he crests the Bridgeton Bridge, feels his way down into the old S. There's a very hard transition here. Oh, that's what you've got to watch out for. Bike 39 almost took him out there as it came across on top of him. The transition from the old circuit to the new circuit as you come off the Bridgeton Bridge is one which is a difficult transition, and you've got to be very, very careful as your wheels feel out the change of surface. He comes now through Sutton's corner. Wisely backs off there. No point at this stage in letting another motorcycle take him out, and then charges down the outside up into BP Bend, and that's the mark of a man who is trying when you see him take another competitor as easily as that and onto the main straight again. Good time in the dry is about a 1:25 for a bike like this. In the wet, 1:46.34. That's not half bad, about 20 seconds off the dry pace. The lap record 1:16.9 stands to Dennis Neal in the superbike class.
That's the Phillips leaderboard. After 245 laps, the lead bike, number 7, on its 246th, and therefore with 24 to go now as he goes by the board. And you can see the gap back to number 9 in second place, 6 laps or 5 and a bit. And then number 4 is in the place behind. which is the Ducati. 239 laps completed, but it too due to come up and complete 240. Then in the three behind are, in fact the four behind are all production bikes, and they're all Suzuki 1100s. 39 Hilton Steel, Ian Standen there, 235 completed. Number 36, 234 completed, and that has Neville Hiscock and Alan Decker riding. And 44, just at the right there, 234 completed, Graham Thompson, Wayne Pratt.
Coming into the pits, bike 7, the race leader, another unscheduled stop, the second unscheduled stop he's had in the last half hour. Let's see what's the matter with Gary Coleman. He's got 5 laps lead on Bill McCulloch and Phil O'Brien. Let's see how long this pit stop takes and what it is all about that is bringing him in. His team's ready.
Only 23 laps remaining for that bike to cover to win this Coca-Cola 800. Would be the first major win for Gary Coleman. Look at him, he's exhausted. He is absolutely worn out, frozen, wet, tired, stiff. And Greg Pretty, the bike's ready and waiting. Get a rider and put him on it. And it's going to be Greg Pretty, just checking the chain. Adjustment, Pretty not quite ready in fact. Moyna Bolden there too, helping in the pit area. On he gets, and a gallant, great ride by Gary Coleman, who's done it so smoothly and well. You'd never know from the smooth way he's been circulating that he was as stiff and as tired as he showed when he got off the bike. And away he goes, Greg Pretty, to South Australia. Former national title holder, into the saddle, a man who dropped the bike earlier in the day, don't forget that.
39.2 seconds the stop as Greg Pretty goes out again, facing 23 excruciating laps to the finish of the Coca-Cola 800.
All the tension of knowing that one inauspicious moment could end their dreams, their claim to some $9,000 odd of prize money. There's the Ducati Pantar too, going to give him real curry, because Lee Roebuck's in the groove, and he knows Greg Pretty's not, and if he can unsettle him, well then he could pick up a place if Pretty makes an error.
Pretty putting his foot down there through that corner, so he's really feeling out the circuit at this stage, but he's using so much of the track, and in fact it's very hard for Roebuck to find a way through.
Straightening the bike too as he went through the water there, whereas Roebuck rode it through at an angle.
Off the Bridgeton Bridge, down through the Essex for the first time. Pretty getting a bit sideways there. Take it easy, Greg Pretty. This is only your first lap on the motorcycle, and you should be using it to feel out the track, because you've not been there for a while.
Good set of Goodyear wet weather racing tyres on the front and the back of the little Pantar. $150 on each end. And look at the job they're doing, and the good riding being done by Roebuck.
And he takes the lead from bike 7, which he'll lose down the straight again. But that gets him one lap away from Pretty and Coleman, so he's 4 laps now in arrears.
Now the straight. We saw it happen before with Coleman. Let's see again what sort of speed Greg Pretty can muster up in his first time at full speed down this saturated main straight. Not quick enough to haul him back. And so with this lap now around the back section, Roebuck will run away from him.
And the rain just won't stop. It keeps bucketing down. You look down to the south and there's just more rain coming. There is no way that anyone can hope for the rain to stop before the end of this race.
It leaves the race situation unchanged though, with bike number 7 now with a margin of 5 laps over second placed Suzuki 1100 number 9, Bill McCulloch and Phil O'Brien. Third placed the Ducati, Steve Fisher, Lee Roebuck.
Well, with me at the moment, Gary Coleman, who had such a marvellous ride over those final stages of the race. And Gary, you tell me that you can't feel a thing in your hands. It must be very, very bitter out there.
Oh, it's the worst conditions I've ever even thought about riding, let alone racing. And, you know, like my hands, I can't feel anything. Legs, feet, everything's just, couldn't see, couldn't breathe. It was just really cold and couldn't see. That was the worst thing.
How hard is it to concentrate under conditions like that?
I was finding it real hard, particularly the fact that we're in the lead and there's so much resting on these last few laps, and it was sort of hard, you know, concentrating on that and the race and the lap riders and everything.
Well, the track really can't be getting too much worse than it was about an hour or an hour and a half ago. Is there anything more difficult about it at the moment?
No, it's the same. The fact that you can't see, you just got to remember the last lap where all the water was, and you just keep following the same line that you took last time.
Any special news for Greg Pretty when he got on the bike?
No, everything's going good. Just hang in there.
Hang in there and see you at the finish.
Yeah, I think we'll be there. Well, we've got 21 laps there. We'll be there.
Splashing through the Oran Park deluge, the only lady rider in the event, Jenny Coates in 7th position on her Suzuki GSX 750. Magnificent effort from Jenny Coates and a 19-year-old co-rider, Leon Faver, this afternoon. They've come from about 35th position at the start to come through to 7th outright and be 4th in the production class behind Hilton Steele, Graham Thompson, Neville Hiscock, and then of course themselves. They lead such people as Michael Corton and Scott Stevens on the Superbike Kawasaki, and also Dave Robbins and Pete Byers on the Ducati. So all you need is a bit of luck and a lot of consistency, and you're going to take home some sort of money from the Coca-Cola 800. And even as I speak, the lap board upgrades them to 6th position outright and 3rd in the production class.
Which means for outright $750, $500 for production, so $1,250. Probably not a lot of money to take home, but nevertheless it's all part of $27,250 prize money, which makes it the richest purse for a motorcycle race in Australia, and at 800 kilometres the longest, unless you go back to such as the 24-hour Mount Druitt years ago.
And there's the reason that Jenny Coates and Leon Faver have been upgraded to 6th place, because Hilton Steele and Ian Standen, who were coming 4th outright, have dropped the model, joining the long list of people who've put their motorcycles down the road today. And it would appear to me that the way they're walking back to the pits, that they have no real intention of getting it moving again. Greg Pretty is wishing that Ducati would go away, and that's exactly what it's doing at the moment. For the last 20 laps or so, the Ducati of Lee Roebuck has been all over the race leader, bike 7, Greg Pretty, and that must be worrying Pretty. All he wants at the moment is a clear track and the opportunity to last out the next 11 laps and bring his bike home to take out some $5,000 outright prize money and $2,000 for the Superbike class. But bike 4, cheeky Lee Roebuck, just won't get out of his way. He's all over him. He gets a little bit of a lead through the S's and then drops back on the main straight when Pretty overtakes him again. And so they go side by side, in fact daring each other on occasions, running up alongside each other in places where at this late stage of the afternoon they just shouldn't be trying it on.
The difference in the speed between the Ducati there and the Chamberlain-Gleeson Yamaha 650 as they came out of the corner was quite incredible. Considerable number of kilometres an hour. And as you can see down the straight, the Yamaha not interested in trying to go fast enough to overtake it. Through the bottom corner they go, pussyfooting, reaching maximum speeds even in the rain of around 170 kilometres an hour. And then Roebuck pulling away again. A cheeky manoeuvre because Pretty had pulled past him, but he's fought back, still though in 3rd place. And there are now 10 laps to go. They're on their 260th lap.
In the shortened Coke 800, which is now down to 270 laps from the 306 lap distance, which it was scheduled to run. In the lead, bike 7, Greg Pretty. Behind him, Bill McCulloch on bike 9, the Suzuki 1100. Then Lee Roebuck on bike 4, the Ducati 600. Neville Hiscock on the Suzuki GSX 1100, the first of the production bikes. Then comes Graham Thompson and Wayne Pratt on another GSX 1100. And then Jenny Coates and Leon Faver on another Suzuki, but a GSX 750 in 6th position. Here's the Suzuki 1100 of Bill McCulloch and Phil O'Brien. Bike 9 right there, which is almost a lap ahead of 3rd place bike, the Ducati, and it's McCulloch on the machine at this stage. Look how soaked his t-shirt is. He's put it on for some light relief, I guess, to try and keep his leathers a little bit dry, but it hasn't worked.
Off the bridge he comes. He's done a grand job, really has, where many more experienced, more favoured and quicker riders have failed, have made rider error and have slipped down in a big way. That includes all of the former race leaders and in fact the present race leader. This bike has circulated beautifully consistently, and from lap 190 in 108, he was in 16th place. He pulled it up to second place, the team did, by lap 190. A brilliant effort. Laps remaining now in this, what we might call the Coca-Cola 700, because it's been shortened, 36 laps, which brings it to 707 kilometres. Big motorcycle there to swing through that left-hander and brake, and there's the race leader, the man that for the latter half of this race the rest of the field have been unsuccessfully chasing. Greg Pretty up in the lead, up in the saddle again, the man who took the first riding stint, dropped the bike, quickly got it going again, has shared it throughout with Gary Coleman, who's ridden faultlessly and very smoothly, and who now has nothing to do but bring it home over the next 2.5 laps.
A wise decision on the part of Oran Park organisers to shorten the race today, certainly with the way the clouds are hanging about and the way the light is dimming. Another 36 laps of racing here would have seen the Coke 800 finishing in darkness.
Pitman's Yamaha reckon they might have cut 100 pounds, 40 odd kilos off the weight of that bike in removing the big heavy mufflers, the rear swing arm, the rear crown wheel and pinion and drive shaft. A lot of weight in all of that, and it really handles beautifully. This is its debut outing. Several months ago they announced they were developing a new bike and they weren't releasing any details. This is what they came up with. They went for engine reliability, improving the rear end of it for racing conditions, for there's certainly nothing wrong with it under road conditions. In fact, many people consider the drive shaft to be preferable. I certainly do. But for racing conditions, it had advantages to convert it, and it's been a marvellously running bike. He's on his second last lap now, and the bike itself has run faultlessly, and that can't often be said for a newly developed machine in its first outing.
Two engines developed for the Bike 7, the Greg Pretty, Gary Coleman leading Yamaha XS 1100. One is a long-distance engine. That's in the bike at the moment. It's not that much more developed than is the stock XS 1100 engine. The other one, which Malcolm Pittman, the genius who puts these Yamahas together in South Australia, has prepared, is a red-hot, stove-hot sprint engine, which should be something to see when Greg Pretty gets on this bike in sprint events later this year.
Pretty didn't compete in the event last year. He was away in Europe having not a very happy time, but Gary Coleman didn't have a particularly happy time either. Gary Coleman retired from the event last year.
Official standing by with a blue flag to indicate that there's 1 lap remaining in the event. So when Greg Pretty comes round now, he'll get the blue flag, which will tell him he's on his last lap in the Coca-Cola 800, and boy, won't he be glad to see that.
Gary Coleman shared a Yamaha with Len Attlee last year, did only 35 laps before they retired from the event. So this team really has come from very little experience in the Coca-Cola 800 to, dare we say, victory. 3 kilometres to go. Blue flag to bike number 7. 2.62 kilometres to go. 1 lap at the Grand Prix circuit at Oran Park.
3 unscheduled pit stops for this bike today, 6 in all under those circumstances. But with the attrition rate that has hit the other lead competitors, that's not bad.
5 laps in front of bike 9 in second place. It on the same lap as the Ducati number 4 in third place. It 7 laps in front of the leading production bike, the Hiscock Deca Suzuki number 36, which is on the same lap as the Suzuki number 45, the Coates Favour bike that's come up to 5th place, and 44, which is also on the same number of laps, another Suzuki, Thompson and Pratt. And the remaining prototype bike in the race, theoretically the fastest bikes in the race, in 12th place, the Ducati number 2. One of a number of Ducatis in this race. They've tended to fall out of production races, but 2 were entered in the prototype class. Bike 4, which is lying third outright, and 2 of them in the superbike class, 1 in the production class.
Pretty comes up on the tail of that bunch of riders and he backs right off. He is taking no chances whatsoever.
As bike number 4 is not as highly modified as they originally intended, it's been moved from the prototype class down to the superbike class as Greg Pretty has 1 corner to victory.
And there's the checkered flag. Greg Pretty's done it. He's won the second Coca-Cola 800 in a time of about 7 hours 20 minutes with 36 laps taken off. He's jubilant.
Most welcome sight in motor racing is that black and white flag when it's waved at you, and particularly after conditions such as the riders have endured today. 7 hours 28 minutes 30.5 seconds last year, but that was for the complete distance. So with more rain this year, the race has been run at a slower pace, and it will be a jubilant Greg Pretty, but even more jubilant, I think. Pretty, 24 years old, but even more jubilant than he will be the 27-year-old Newcastle rider Gary Coleman, who's landed a nice Yamaha contract this year for production and superbike racing, and has come in his first outing so successfully. He will be thrilled. Let's have a look at the official results, subject to confirmation and perhaps to protest by teams, although we don't know of any circulating. There they are. Yamaha, Suzuki, Ducati, first, second and third. 1100 cc's and 1100 the first two. 601 cc's. In the third place, Ducati Pantar. Greg Pretty did a grand job. So too did Gary Coleman. So too did Malcolm Pittman, the man who prepared the bike. And in fact, all the competitors, because under abysmally depressing conditions and difficult conditions, some 27 bikes still circulating out of the 44 starters.
The Coleman team all down in the pits waiting to greet their lead rider.
Brings Yamaha forward from a production Yamaha 1100, taking third place outright last year, ridden by Ron Bolden and Rick Walden. Production bikes, in fact, faring worse this year than they did last year, because last year they took second and third. This year, their best place was fourth.
Here he comes to the welcome he richly deserves, Greg Pretty.
The front number peppered away by the paint belting at the bike at speeds of up to 180 kilometres an hour. And a warm welcome from officials and from his team in the interview area. And without being funny, he's got every chance of falling off on the mud down there on the grass.
At least at bogging the thing, that is just so muddy down there, the quagmire of Oran Park.
28 finishers crossed the finishing line, and what a jubilant team.
Yep.
David Jones, the race secretary of Oran Park and the man who puts it together, congratulating Greg Pretty now. About to move him up to our commentary position where Bob Vincent's waiting to talk to the winners of the Coca-Cola 800. And I might add, to probably present them with a cheque for around about $7,000. That's not bad pay, even for the sort of conditions that they've endured today.
South Australian Pretty. Quite some hero back in his home city of Adelaide. Actually, public appeals by a radio station over there got people sending in money to help him in his campaign in Europe last year, but he was dreadfully underfinanced. But here he comes now. Pretty and Gary Coleman, winners of the second Coca-Cola 800.
Well, with me at the moment, the winners after a very gruelling but somewhat shortened Coca-Cola 800, Gary Coleman and Greg Pretty, a marvellous race. And just before they go to the Coca-Cola presentation, I want to have a word with both of them. First of all, Greg, it must be some consolation for you after having such a wretched year last year.
Yeah, well, I don't know about the short race. It was long enough for me, especially in these conditions. Yeah, I hope it's a good change for this year, good omen. So.
And you had the perfect foil in Gary, of course.
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, Gary
Gary went out there and did everything that was required of him, and of course near the end all we had to do was keep it upright. I think under the circumstances we were pretty lucky with Wayne and Dennis and the other boys going down, but under those conditions that was easy.
You said to me yesterday that the Yamaha was bulletproof and that you thought it would last the full virtually 800 kilometres, and it did.
Yeah, that was really part of the bike that we weren't worried about, the engine. It's a fairly proven engine now over the 3 or 4 years that it's been around, so it was just a matter of the conditions. As a matter of fact, we only finished the bike on Wednesday, so Mount Pittman's done a great job on it, and he deserves a big hand.
Well, Gary, you must be very proud of yourself too, because that's your first major title, isn't it?
That's the first major long-distance title I've won, yeah. It's really good. It's been a good time.
And is it going to be a Pittman's Yamaha association for the two of you for the rest of the season?
Well, no, actually it's not. It's going to be McCulloch Yamaha for me. So so this might be a first and only ride. I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens during the year.
Pays him more, I think.
Can we look forward to seeing you at the Castrol?
I'll be there for sure.
Greg Pretty and Gary Coleman, the winners of the Coca-Cola 800 for 81 here at Oran Park. This has been Bob Vincent with Will Hagan and John Smales for ABC Sport.
And they are not so